I just want to say thanks to the Sinn Féin negotiating team, led by Mark McGuinness, and obviously today has been a long time in the making, and considerable progress has been made. There obviously is more progress to be made. We need always to remind ourselves that this is a process, it's a continuum. But while I'm buíhas a hórsta na daoine bheith ag obair anseo ar son Sinn Féin agus ar na páirtí eile bheith ag obair linn a rith na canseanna. I also want to thank all of the other parties for their endeavours, and it's quite interesting, and Martin might want to deal with this, that there was more agreement made between the parties here of our own volition. The parties working very, very tightly together. And in many ways, the reason why we end up in these crisis points is because the co-guarantors of the agreement, the two governments, don't face up to their responsibilities. So when people here in this executive were focused on what needed to be done, then they rose to the challenge. So, you know, there are aspects of this which I think that we can be very, very proud of, but particularly protecting vulnerable people and the certainty that any welfare benefits which fall into the remit of the executive will not be reduced. Remember, we were told this wasn't possible. And then there are issues which Martin will deal with, which are historic issues of past and parades and the whole issue of identity. So I think it's a good day. Obviously, as I said, it's part of a process, and we just wish everybody well, and we understand fully the expectations and the responsibilities that are on us and the other political parties here. And we also understand that some folks out there are going to be disappointed that issues which quite rightly should have been dealt with were not dealt with, and we'll return to that on another day.
But as Jerry has said, we set out from the very beginning to achieve a comprehensive agreement. And I think a lot of progress has been made across a range of issues, not least the effort by all of the parties together to achieve a very significant financial package. I'm particularly pleased as a former Minister of Education that £500 million of new money will go towards supporting shared education and integrated education. And of course, the opportunities that other aspects of the package presents are opportunities that we as an executive, and no doubt Simon Hamilton as our Finance Minister, will try to utilise to the best advantage of everybody within society. We were dealing with very serious and very neuralgic issues that evaded us during the course of the hash talks in terms of finding a solution for them. And of course the approach to this election was complicated by the austerity agenda that this present Tory-led coalition government have embarked upon. And that posed massive problems for our executive and for Sinn Féin as a political party that believes it has a duty and a responsibility to stand up for the most disadvantaged, vulnerable and disabled people within our society. So we were very determined in the course of this negotiation to ensure that we put in place adequate protections for the most vulnerable people within our society. And that meant concluding an agreement which would see people's benefits protected and would see within the power of our Assembly the ability of all of us to stand up for those people who, no doubt, if the Tory administration had have had its way, would have been plunged into very severe difficulties. So we're proud of our achievement. I think it is remarkable that we managed against all odds, when people told us it couldn't be done, to achieve this in the interests of those people. I think that is something to be proud of. I think it's also hugely important, given the fact that we didn't get cross-party support for the Haas proposals. But it is quite clear that Haas led the way. If you look at the architecture of what we've agreed, it's all Haas. And quite clearly, in terms of how we deal with the past, what we wanted to do was ensure that people who were victims of the conflict were given as much support as the political administration could give them in terms of providing a menu of options that they could rely on in the course of the time ahead. And of course, within the victims group, people were very concerned, given the efforts that they had made going the whole way to the European Court of Human Rights to achieve coroners' courts which were effectively in a position to deliver the truth and justice that they were seeking. And in the course of that negotiation, we've protected the coroners' courts. I think Theresa Villiers is on the record as saying that the British government would have liked to have gone a different direction. That different direction was at variance with the victims in our society. And remember, all of the parties here are signed up to ensuring that victims are at the centre of all our approaches in terms of delivering for them. So I think good work was done. In relation to the issue of parades, well, I'm very pleased that the panel on parades, or whatever it was called, is not now going to go ahead. What we need to do is recognise that we have a duty and a responsibility to pursue the agenda that we've set out for ourselves in the course of this agreement today, to ensure that we tackle the necessary legislation that will be required to ensure that people's rights on all sides of this debate are protected. And of course, for us, we have majored on the issue of the code of conduct, we've majored on the issue of the criteria, and we've majored on the issue of accountability in terms of how these situations are progressed. And I'm actually very proud that I come from a part of the north of Ireland that solved its parade problems many years ago. 2 major parades took place in my city this year, one by the Apprentice Boys and one by the Orange Order. Almost 15,000 people turned up for both of them. There was no need for a Parades Commission determination because the Apprentice Boys and the Orange Order in Derry are actually in the mode of recognising that you have to respect your neighbours, and they do. And I applaud particularly the Apprentice Boys for the contribution that they make to our society in the city of Derry. So obviously good work has been done. Jerry and I have made it clear that the Sinn Féin leadership will meet in due course and that we will be recommending the acceptance of the outcome of the deliberations that have taken place over the course of recent times. The last point I want to make is that in terms of how we move forward needs to be different, folks, from what we've seen over the last 2 years. The sight of protests on the streets, and I support to the bitter end people's right to protest, but protests that turned into violence, where people were being abused and assaulted, where police officers in their hundreds were being injured, I thought brought great disgrace on everybody associated with that sort of activity. And there was absolutely nothing for our executive to be proud of in terms of the inability to stand up to those people who would try to plunge us back to the past. I have faced down people who have tried to plunge us back to the past. They're the people who killed British soldiers in Antrim. They're the people who killed Stephen Carroll. They're the people who killed Ronan Kerr. And they're the people who killed David Black, a prison officer. So if we're to move forward, there has to be a step change in relationships in terms of the ability of politicians to come together, to stand together, as I did with others, against those who would attempt to plunge us back to the past. That's the change that's required in the time ahead. There needs to be respect for each other, there needs to be respect for each other's mandates, and there needs to be leadership shown by all of us in terms of, for want of a better word, rehabilitating the poor image that the Assembly and the Executive has. So I am hopeful, very hopeful, as a result of our deliberations over the course of the last short while. I want this to be a fresh start. We have always been very positive and very constructive in every negotiation that we have been involved in, and we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to ensure that the implementation of what we've agreed gets our best efforts and gets a result for the most important people of all, the people who are out on the streets crying for leadership from their politicians.
I also think the big point that, and I just touched upon this earlier on, there are uncompleted commitments. There are folks here who have set their face against rights for Irish language speakers, who are against a Bill of Rights, who are against increasing the connectiveness which is naturally to the benefit of everyone on an island as small as this. But the big thing is, you see, is there's now a peaceful and democratic way to sort those matters out. And I look forward to the day when there will be an Act in the Gaeilge. I look forward to the day when there will be a Bill of Rights, and that's in everybody's interests. And the type of tolerance and respect that Martin spoke about is just part of the norm here. We also need to tackle sectarianism, and we need to all the time keep making progress, particularly on rights-based issues and on equality. Bear in mind, we're just on the cusp of Christmas. There'll be kids in the Shankill Road who won't have a decent Christmas dinner. There'll be kids in parts of West Belfast or the Creggan or elsewhere. The test of us as practising politicians is whether we can make sure that those children are both sustained, nurtured, educated, and have a job in a liberated society in this part of the island.